I said, he told me that he's not my real father, and my real father committed suicide. And my mother, based on what she knew from the papers, okay, my mother and father weren't close. My mother assumed what she read in the papers was true. I'm assuming. Um, so uh, that
Let
one
me
kind
ask you this. Let me ask you this, man. All right.
of
So that day, you talking to your mom, man. How did you feel emotionally?
devastated, um, broken. Uh, I wanted to know about my family. I wanted to know, but I didn't even know where to begin to look. And then when I asked my mother um, about my birth certificate, she said my birth certificate said father unknown because back in those days, in order to get for a mother to get welfare, you couldn't know who the child's father was. She told me she would fix it. She told me that she would pay for it to get it fixed, and so I definitely want that. Wanted that fixed, and I'm like, okay, bet. I need you to do that. And the first chance I got, I moved back from New York City. I was at the time I was living in Manhattan. I moved from New York City back to Pittsburgh um, to find my dad's family. It was easy to find my dad's wife and children because they still live in the same house. It took me 6 hours to find them. I called the house. I said, "Can I speak to William Brock?" That was because he's a junior. And he said, "This is he." I said, "Did your father work for Volkswagen in New Stanton, Pennsylvania?" He said, "Yep." I said, "Did he commit suicide?" He said, "Yep." I said, "Are you William Brock? Are you his older son?" He said, "Yep." I said, "Well, are you standing up?" He said, "Yep." I said, "You might want to sit down for this one." He said, "What's up?" I said, "I'm your older brother." And we talked for about 15 minutes. And I told him to put his mother on the phone. And I read in the papers that they had gotten some money from Volkswagen. I didn't really know how serious this was when I first learned of it because I just learned from what the paper said that he committed suicide. And so when he put his mother on the phone, I said, "I don't know if my father ever told you about me." And she said he did. I said, "I don't want your money, because I didn't know how serious it was back then. Um, because and then also at the time, you know, I had a lot of dope, I had a lot of dope dealers in my family, so money was never an issue back then. Um, so I told her, I don't want your money. I just want to I want to know my brothers and sisters. And she said, your father told me about you. I said, good. And then after I called the house a few times, she asked me, why do you keep calling here? And she said she wanted proof. Proof for what? If you said my father told you about me, but I didn't understand where that came from. And I didn't really know where to look for my dad's brothers and sisters because I didn't know anything about them. And I never forget, I was living in Pittsburgh for a few months, and the guy who raised me, uh, his his brother's ex-wife, who was my favorite aunt for all those years. I told her, what I had been told, and she said, "Come over to the house. I got something for you. I've been saving it for you because I knew you'd find out the truth someday. So I've been saving it for you. So come on over to the house." So I go over to the house, and she gives me all these newspaper articles, and that's when I found my dad's brothers and sisters. I'm sorry. That's when I found my dad's wife and children. I'm sorry. But as far as his brothers and sisters, I didn't know where to look. So one day I'm working it, and so I prayed about it. I said, Lord, I really want some help here. I don't even know where to look. I don't know any of their names. I don't know anything about them. And my mother is from the Homewood area of Pittsburgh. My father is from uh, the Garfield area of Pittsburgh. But I don't know anybody from Garfield. I've never been there. It's not that far, but I don't really hang in. And Pittsburgh is like, uh, from what I remember, for the little bit of time that I was there, it's divvied up into sections, and different gangs run these different sections. And if you're not from that neighborhood, doctor, and you rolling around up in that neighborhood and you don't know nobody, you might not be living around too, walking around too long. You follow me? So I never forget. I'm working. I'm still young now. I'm like 16, 17. And I'm working at this burger joint, and uh, and I'm working with this guy, and I'm like, man, you look familiar, dude. Where you from? And he said Garfield. I said, I don't know where from Garfield. I said, where do you hang out? And he told me the different places he hung out at. No, I don't know where from either. I said, what's your last name? He said Brock. I'm like, Brock. I said, you ever have anybody in your family used to work for Volkswagen and he committed suicide? He said, yeah. He said, you're not gonna tell me you're my long lost brother or something. I said, well, that depends on how you're related to him. He said that was my long lost. He said that was my uncle. And I said, I'm not gonna tell you I'm your long lost brother, but I'm definitely gonna tell you I'm your long lost cousin. So he said, you got brothers and sisters, right? I said, yeah, I got two brothers and one sister. I got a brother named William and a brother named Reuben. I said, what's my sister's name? I knew it, but I wanted to see if he knew, because I want to see if he was for real, because I really didn't believe it. He said, your sister's. He said, I think her name is Leah. And then I said to myself, he's full of crap. Because what first cousin doesn't know their first cousin's name? You know what I'm saying? So I thought he was full of crap. But we exchanged numbers anyway. And from the way I understand it went down, my dad's favorite sister's son was in town from DC that weekend. And he went home and he saw my his other cousin and said, hey man, Babe brother had another kid, because my father's family name was Babe brother because he was the baby. And he said, oh yeah. And he said, yeah. And he gave him my number and he took it home to his mother. And from what I understand, he told his mother, he said, Babe brother had another kid because I feel work for him. And she said, my brother ain't had no other kids. If he had another kid, I'd have known about it. And he said, well, why don't you call him up? Because that Brock gene is strong, so you better know if he's full of crap or not when he walks in the door. So she called. She paged me on my pager. Back in those days, we didn't have cell phones yet. They blew up my pager, and I called her back, and she said, "You claim to be my brother's son?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "Well, I want to meet you." I said, "Bet. What's your address?" She gave me her address, and I went over her house, and I went over all cocky, like, "Yeah, what?" And when I knocked on the door, her son, he was a bodybuilder, so he was a little, he looking all cock diesel. And oh, hi, how you doing, little brother? Because I was just as skinny as I want to be, you know what I'm saying? And when I walked in the door, I never forget, his mother was standing in the kitchen, and her jaw just hit the floor. She said, "You're definitely my brother's son. You look more like my brother than his other kids." She said, "Who is your mother?" And I told her my mother's name. She said, "Boy, you were conceived on my couch. Your mom and dad used to come over at my house and watch my kids all the time." And I asked her, I said, "Why did he commit suicide?" And that's when she sat me down and she pulled out all these papers, and she showed me all these newspaper articles and all these different things. And she said, "Boy, your father didn't commit suicide. He was murdered."
Your name Brock, right?
Yes, sir.
So it wasn't Brock before, right? When you had the other guy that you thought was your father, was your name Brock then?
Bro, you getting kind of personal.
Well, the people going
People
they
gonna
gonna
get
watch it
personal.
and they go,
Nah, it was my mother's last name, but I'm not giving it.
oh, no, you don't have to give it. All right, so when did you change your name to Brock?
Uh, a few years later, when after I sat down with the Brock family and realized that I was accepted. I mean, they accepted me more than my own mother. You know, I never forget that night after I sat down with my dad's brothers and sisters, and we began doing some research. We did some digging, and I found out some things. You know, um, I never forget, the after I sat with her that night and we stayed up the whole night. I ended up having to spend the night on her couch, and I never forget, she left the light on in the hallway, and I was thinking to myself, what if this guy really isn't my father? What if what if what if it's just not? real? You know what I'm saying? What if it's just made up? And I never forget, brother, the light was on in the hallway, and I heard a voice come from around the corner as clear as day, like I'm talking to you. And that voice said, "You are my son, and I love you, and don't you ever forget that." It was so clear. It was so like uh
Vivid.
vivid. There you go. Thank you, sir. It was so vivid that I had to get up and walk around the corner and look like, who's there? You know what I'm saying? um, I never met my father, man. But well, I met him twice when I was a kid, but I don't remember it. I was like 2 years old. My mother told me when I was a kid that um that I would that I was the type of kid that my father would used to come by and try to take me. He wanted to see me all the time, and I never forget. Even the guy that raised me told me once. He said, your father. He said, I want you to know your father desperately wanted to be a part of your life. He did. He tried. He hired a private. He hired the best private detective in Pennsylvania to find me. And every time he got close, um, you asked me how was my childhood coming up. My childhood coming up was hard because it was hard to get good grades in school because I kept changing schools. Like I would start, I might spend 6 months at a school, and I didn't understand why I always had to change school, why I was moving so much, and it was hard because this school might be doing I don't know division, and this school over here is doing subtraction, and this school over here is doing adding and subtracting, and this one over here is doing statistics. So my childhood coming up, because I moved around so much because my mother was trying to hide me from my father. I didn't do good in school. Um, I I was able I've always been able to mingle and talk to people. I've always been able to hold conversation. I've always been able to get involved. That's not a problem. But it was just hard to maintain focus. You with me? Um, but the point I was trying to make a moment ago, I was talking to the guy who raised me as his son, and I never forget. He told me, he said he went to my father's church one day, and he told my father, if you don't leave, his mother alone, I'm gonna kick you behind. He told me, he said, T, when I went to your father, he said, I went to your father's church and stood outside his church and told him that. I said, man, why would you do something like that? He said, because your father was a third-degree black belt in 3 different forms of martial arts. He said, if I'd have done that anywhere else, your father would have beat the hell out of me. But your father had enough discipline not to do nothing in front of his church.
All right, so the reason why you moved from place to place was to escape the private investigator.
I guess. I didn't really, as you got to realize, coming up as a child, I didn't understand why we were moving, but that was it. That was it. That's what I learned later on in life.
Let me ask you this, Dan. Why you think your mom tried so hard to keep you away from your father?
I'm gonna say this, and then we're gonna leave this conversation about mom alone. I believe personally that my mother's a control freak. If it's not her way, then it can't be done.
All righty, so you find your father's people, you find your father's family. They embrace you with open arms. What's the next move after that?
Next move after that, I started looking into some of the facts. You know, my aunt says he didn't commit suicide, and so I started looking into some of the things because you got to understand. My aunt told me, 10 days before he died, he had a family meeting, told everyone in the family he had just been approved for a $9 million venture. He was going to purchase a hotel, a Hilton hotel. He was excited. He was telling everybody about the different things, the different positions they were going to have. He already had his own business. He had a cleaning business. He was running for mayor in the city of Washington, Pennsylvania. Um, and in doing some of my digging, some of the things didn't make sense. You know, and so I wondered, after I began digging and seeing that this guy really didn't commit suicide. And when I started asking some of his former employees and fellow employees for their help, and I was hearing things like, "Well, I can't help you because I got a family," and he didn't. He died for you, and not only that, he died for you, and I never met him, and he tried desperately to be a part of my life. But if he'd have put you down, you know what I mean, if he had the same attitude that other blacks had for him, I wonder what I could have learned from him. You know what I mean? I feel cheated. And then when my fellow blacks, the people who he died standing up for, I mean, I wonder how they would feel if he had approached if their children approached him if it were the other way around. Would they want him to take that approach?
Okay, so check this out right here. Originally, your father was not involved with the lawsuit. What made him get involved with the lawsuit?
Because the company tried to blackmail him with knowingly false information to convince him to coerce the other blacks to back out of the lawsuit.
Can you dig into that just a little bit more?
Okay, so they try to say that he raped someone, so that they could get. So okay, here's the thing. You uh I have a lawsuit against your mother, right? And your mother is at risk of losing her house. Okay? So you come to me and you say, "Well, if you go through with this lawsuit, T, then I'm going to tell the courts that you try to extort money from me." Now you know that's a flat out lie, but you do it because you want me to back out of the lawsuit. Make sense?
Yeah. So, what are you trying to do now? What is your purpose?
What I want to do is I want the world to know that William Brock was murdered. When I spoke to Dr. Cyril Wecht, have you ever heard that name before?
Nah.
Dr. Wecht is one of the best pathologists in the country. He's from Pittsburgh. He worked on the O.J. Simpson case, the Kennedy case, and Nicole Smith, Whitney Houston. I mean, the guy's well known all over the world. Okay. And I asked him, has he ever dealt with suicide? He said, of course. I said, where do people generally tend to shoot themselves? He said, men shoot themselves in the mouth, under the chin, or in the temple. Women typically tend to shoot themselves in the heart because they want an open casket funeral. So when I asked him, has he ever dealt with a suicide case where a left handed man shot himself in the back of the right side of the head? He said no. So I asked him, he asked me at that point, what did the coroner's inquest say? I explained to him that there was no inquest. There was a report, but no inquest. He said, that sounds like foul play. So now I'm wondering, why won't our government get involved? So I went to the Pennsylvania State Police, right? Because I'd gone to the FBI with all kinds of facts and proof, and they won't take my case. They could just kind of blow me off. And when I was talking to an associate of mine who worked for the NSA, he told me that the reason why our government isn't really doing anything about it is because um, I don't have enough people talking about it. He said because because you understand that every time Volkswagen makes a sale, our government gets tax money. Get enough people talking about it, then they won't have a choice. They'll have to reopen the case. So my goal is to get more is to do enough of these shows, sell enough of my T-shirts, get enough people to become a pop with me. Okay, and let's become partners of purpose, and let's get something done together. Let's make those who are in leadership, those who run our government, do their job or get the hell out of the way.
All right. So how can the people get in contact with you, bro?
On Facebook, my name is T.W. Brock. Befriend me on Facebook, and please don't talk to me about booty calls and send me nude pictures of yourself. And I'm talking to the women, and yes, I like women, but I don't want to see that. I want us let us fight for a purpose together. Let us fight to make a difference together. We can. I remember, to tell you a little bit about the character of who I am. When I was in Pittsburgh, uh, I was the youngest member on the board of directors for the NAACP, and I never forget we had, uh, you know you hear stuff about, a friend of mine's. I tell you, a friend of mine's father got me a job at a Mercedes dealer. And he told me, he said, uh, don't expect to get promoted because they don't promote black folks here. Um, and I took that job because I didn't graduate with honors like my father did. I didn't uh, I bounced around a lot. I barely got out by the skin of my teeth. Um, I made it, but barely. Okay, and I never I never forget the the when I took the job, at the Volkswagen plant. It was called Wetzel Motor Works, and um, so I took the job. And the first 4 months I was there, four promotions came available, and they gave it to the white guy. All 4 months. So, the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing and expect different results. So I got a notebook pad. I took a piece out of my father's notebook, because I noticed when going through my father's paperwork that he took scrupulous notes. You hear me? And I mean scrupulous. so, um, so I started taking notes. Okay, I took, those little notebook pads you put in your back pocket. Um, and so what time I punched in, I wrote it down. What time I punched out, I wrote it down. Who When my boss told me to do something, I wrote it down. Who was present there with me, I wrote it down. Was he satisfied when I got finished? I wrote it down, everything. And I never forget, the blacks used to laugh at me. Oh, N word, them notes don't mean nothing. N word, you stupid as hell. N word, da 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 da. You'll never hear me say the N word. I hate that word. I don't understand why we call ourselves that, and we want them to stop calling us that. You know what I mean? I've never seen, white folks go around, what's up, my hunky? Come on, man. So, I mean, you know, if we want them to stop doing it, we need to stop doing it. So anyway, even though they call me that word, I blew it off. I let it roll off my back. And 4 months had gone by, and another position came available, and I applied for that position. When I came in the following day, they gave it to the white guy. All the blacks laughed at me. Oh, N word. I told you it doesn't mean nothing. You stupid as hell. You wasted time. Blah, 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 blah. I still took my notes anyway. At the end of the day, excuse me. At the end of the day, I went to my boss. His name was Lynn Stewart. I said, Lynn, do me a favor. He said, what's that? I said, pick a day next week, any day you like, and give me the day off. He said, why? I said, because I'm going to go down to EEOC and file a complaint. When I came in the following day, guess what happened?
You got the day off that you wanted?
No, sir. They promoted my behind. They
Wow.
created a job. They created a job for me. You follow me? See,
Right.
where there's a will, there's a way. We just got to be willing to put the work in to get it done.
Right. Hey, Brock, do me a favor. Why don't you tell the people more about the website, where they can find it at? What's the www behind it?
Certainly. Yeah, you can visit Justice for Brock at www.justice for FORBROCK.com. Again, that's www.justice for spelled out FORBROCK.com. And every blue word on that website is a hyperlink. Some of my favorite blue words that I really like you to click on once you've clicked into it is the word recruited. Okay, that's a letter that my father wrote to one of his supervisors to cover himself. And I never forget, uh, a couple years back, um, after doing some homework and doing some research myself, there was court documents indicated that that gentleman, Joseph Trudalski, relocated to Shelby, Michigan. So I tracked him down. I called his house, and I said, "May I speak to Joseph Trudalski?" The wife says, "Joe, honey, get the phone." So Joe grabs the phone, and I said, "Joe Trudalski?" He said, "Yep." I said, "You ever work for Volkswagen out in New Stanton, Pennsylvania?" He's all excited. "Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. I used to work out there. Yeah." I said, "Great. Just the guy I wanted to talk to." I'm doing some research into my old man's death, and I wanted to ask you a couple of real quick questions. You'd have thought this guy saw a ghost. I didn't know your father. I said, "Respectfully, sir, I didn't give you his name. His name was William Brock. I didn't know him." I said, "I find that difficult to believe, considering I've got several letters my father had written to you, several you had written back to him. I know you sat 3 desks away from him for 3 years. He was the only black man in the office, and you guys had several run-ins." And this is what he said next. Get this. I didn't kill him. In law enforcement, that's called spontaneous utterance. When I took that to the FBI, they blew me off. I went to the Pennsylvania State Police once, right around the same time I reached out to Trudowski, and I wish I had the name of the officer, but I do have the name of the colonel. But the officer, I called the officer, and I said, my father was murdered, and I need some help. I need some investigators, an investigator to dig into this with me, okay? Because I want my father's case reopened. So the state trooper, he says, "Well, you give me a couple of days to look into this, and I'll get back to you." And he called me back a few days later, and he said, "Man, this case is deeper than you think. Your father definitely didn't commit suicide. We're gonna definitely get to the bottom of this." And he gave me his personal cell phone number, and he said, "Well, we need to, you need to stay in touch with me, so that because we gonna dig into this one, Doc. This is deep." And 2 days turned into 2 weeks, turned into way too long. I hadn't heard from the guy, so I got angry and I called the colonel of the Pennsylvania State Police. His name was Colonel Miller. I remember that one vividly. And I called Colonel Miller up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and I said, uh, I told him about how I hadn't heard from his officer, and his officer told me he was going to dig into it for me. And I want to find out what's going on. Why haven't I heard from him? So he says, "Well, give me a couple days to look into it, and I'll get back to you." He calls me back a few days later, and he says, "I can't help you because this case is out of my jurisdiction." So I said, "Wait, let me get this straight now. You're the Pennsylvania State Police. Nowhere in the state of Pennsylvania is out of your jurisdiction. You follow me?" So he says to me, "Well, sir, I can't help you. This is out of my jurisdiction." I said, "Let me get this straight." I said, "So if I took a gun and I approached one of your officers where this took place in Pennsylvania, and I put a gun to his head and pulled the trigger and blew his head off, you mean tell me you couldn't arrest me because it's out of your jurisdiction? Is that what I'm understanding?" He said, "Sir, I can't help you," and he hung up the phone on me. What that suggested to me is somebody above his head told him to leave it alone.
Wow, man, this is a crazy story right here. I really wish you help, man. I wish that people that watch this show right here, I wish that these guys, they join the website, they donate money, they do whatever it takes in order to get this case reopened, man. I really wish you well with this whole entire debacle. And I just want to say this, man. I appreciate you for joining the show, man. I really appreciate you for joining the show, man. Any last words, bro?
Yes, if you are listening and you want to help, know that this case is deeper than you think. Okay, because this gentleman is saying to you tonight, I have I've had a few attorneys take my case and drop it off just as quick as they pick it up. I don't know why. I don't know what they're afraid of, but nobody is. And I've been threatened. I've been told you better leave this case alone before what happened to your father happens to you. And when I said, well, if he committed suicide, it's not going to happen to me. I was then told, well, you and I both know that your father didn't commit suicide. I was standing in the five and dime store once, and in Washington County, my father hired most of the police force there because when he worked for the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, that's what he did. He hired the police department, fire department, stuff like that. And this police officer was like staring me down. And I'm not well known in Washington County because I'm not from Washington. I'm not, even Washington County is like from, I don't know, Houston to say, uh, uh, what's that, Beaumont. Okay. But even with it being Houston, I was raised in New York City, in money making Manhattan. So I don't know much about, um, you know, uh, uh, about Washington County, Pennsylvania. So I'm standing in this five and dime store, and this Washington County police officer is in there in the store with me, and he's staring me down. So I said, man, why are you looking at me like that? Did I do something to get to bother you? He said, you look like it. I said, Bill Brock. He said, yes. I said, man, that was my father. He said, man, your father didn't commit suicide. Your father hired me. He was a hell of a man, and I know he didn't commit suicide. I said, I know. But even though we know these things, my question is, why can't we get the people who have the power to do something about it? And I tell you what I believe the answer is, because every time Volkswagen makes a sale, our government gets tax money. But if you, the listener, the guy on the other end of this screen, wants to get involved, reach out to me on Facebook, TW Brock.
Wow, man, that shit crazy. But like I said, I appreciate you for joining the show, man. And
Yes,
with
sir.
that being said, right there, and with that being said, I just want to say peace, brother.
Back at you. God bless you.